Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. We're going to return to a brewery that is featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, and this brewery are known mainly for their sour beers, and you could say that this brewery were the ones who really kind of kicked off the whole sour beer thing here in Sweden actually. So it's always nice to review the new beers that they're releasing, but the one that we're going to have a look at today is one that I've wanted to get my hands on for quite some time, and they've just recently re-released it from what I understand. So yeah, looking forward to this one. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it as well. So yeah, for this one then, we are going to head a little bit north of me here in Lund to Landskrona, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Brekeriet. So this particular beer is called Mimosa. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and this one is a sour ale brewed with sea buckthorn and orange zest. So yeah, I think this could be quite interesting. But this beer was released here in Sweden as part of the local småskalig assortment through Systembolaget for August of 2021. But like I said to you, this beer has been out a good few times before. This seems to be the latest edition of it actually. But yeah, really glad to finally get around to reviewing this one. I've heard from quite a few people that this is one of the Brekeriet beers that I really needed to check out. So finally we're ticking it off the list. But yeah, let's see how we go with this one then. Always nice to have something new from Brekeriet here on the channel as well. So let's get started then. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brekeriet before, and we will no doubt add some more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brekeriet then, on to my brewery notes. So, Brekeriet, as I've mentioned to you before, were originally based in Djursland, out to the east of Malmö, but they're now based in Landskrona, which is a bit to the north of me here in Lund. But the company was founded back in 2011 by the Ek brothers. So this is Fredrik, Christian and Andre, and it's a specialist brewery in wild beers using Brettanomyces and Lactobacillus. And these guys, as I said, were the first brewery in Sweden to really do that. And I think they remain the only kind of wholly dedicated sour beer brewery in the country, if I'm not mistaken. But the original brewery that these guys had was based in the old brew house in Djursland, which was actually a share brewery for the local farmers once upon a time. But they brewed their first beers there in 2012, and this brewery had a very modest production capacity of 500 litres per brew, which gave them a yearly output of around 38,000 litres. But since 2015, they've been based in a new brewery in Landskrona, and they can produce 20 hectolitres per brew, and they now have a fermentation capacity of 80 hectolitres. But initially they were producing their wild bunch beers continuously in Landskrona and brewing the Sour Patch ones, which were the more kind of speciality one-off ones down in Djursland, and this continued for about 1.5 years before all of the production was moved to Landskrona in 2017. And this was when they created a separate area, of course, as well for mixed fermentation, so they could mix all these different kinds of yeast that they were using. But they also have their Veiled series, which are barrel-aged versions, and quite often they'll do different versions of beers that they've released normally as well. They use a variety of different yeast strains for these, and I think I've reviewed maybe 4 or 5 of those here on the channel, and I do have another one waiting to be reviewed as well actually, that's a collaboration with a German brewery, so certainly looking forward to that. But in 2020 these guys also started distilling, and they released their first products in the latter part of that year as well. I think it's gins that they do, if memory serves me correctly, but they've got a lot of few different beer distillates and things like that, which seem quite interesting. So at some stage I will need to have a go at some of those. But in 2014 Taking a step back, in 2014 this brewery caused a little bit of a stir because they withdrew completely from Systembolaget in Sweden because they were citing the bureaucracy of this nationalised system. It used to be very, very difficult to get your beers into Systembolaget actually, but they decided to focus on their exports abroad, and there was a period where you could only really get these beers in Denmark actually over the water. But they made the return to Systembolaget thankfully in 2016, and as of August 2021 when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced well in excess of 200 different beers. But I would say that these guys do really kind of proper old school sours actually. Probably my favourite beers that I've had from these guys. Swedish Ninja was a very good one, but unfortunately they only ever did that once. Sour and Salt I very much liked. Wrapped in Red, Purple Rain was another one. Yeah, I've had some really nice beers from this brewery over the years in fact, so it's always nice when you see them kind of being rebrewed, and if you do happen to miss one, as happened with me with Mimosa a couple of times, you will usually get the chance to take a look at it again at some stage. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Brekeriet for the moment. These guys always produce some interesting stuff, so I do recommend you keep an eye on what's coming out through Systembolaget. But yeah, if you want to learn more about this brewery, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of those different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a little look at what this beer has in store for us. So yeah, as you can see, the artwork on this one is very, very nice. It's kind of what you would expect from Brekeriet, to be honest with you. They've always got kind of a plain label with just a little kind of splurge of colour behind it, but I do think it's quite tasteful if you like, and I do like their little how do you say, their little slogan there, from Skåne with love. But you can see the Brekeriet B, and it tells you on the back here this one is part of their special series. So Mimosa is part of our collection of beers known as the specials, made in experimental batches in limited editions. But it says that this one contains barley malt, half torn, I'm not sure what that is, but wheat malt and rye, orange zest and some sugar actually. So it's also a little bit of vanilla in this one, and some lactose bacteria as well, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, maybe this one will be quite a smooth sour in fact. I think this one could be quite interesting. But yeah, a fruity tart ale and refreshing mimosa inspired wild ale with sea buckthorn and orange zest. So yeah, white bottle cap on this one. Of course, I have seen some Brekeriet beers that have black bottle caps and a white B on them, although not in a little while, come to think of it. But yeah, 330ml bottle this one. I actually can't remember what I paid for this beer, but 35 kroners seems to stick in mind, so maybe it was about that. So that's about €3.50, somewhere in the region of £3 sterling, and then I guess somewhere in the region of like $4.25 or whatever. But yeah, 6.5% sour ale this one, with orange zest and sea buckthorn, with wheat malt, rye malt, a little bit of vanilla and some lactose sugar. So yeah, lactobacillus. So let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this has in store for us. So a little bit of smoke on the opening, and we'll get it out and into the glass. There we go. Ooh. I think this is going to be quite nice actually. So there we go, a nice little bit of sediment in it to kind of do it up a little bit. So yeah, let me just line this up so that my OCD is happy. So yeah, before the head completely disappears on this one, you can see that when we poured this beer, it poured with about a quarter finger of a kind of, I would say, kind of creamy coloured head, but that has obviously just faded away to be a very thin layer of almost nothing, and there's just a few wispy bits sitting on top of the glass there, but you do get a little bit of a ring just around the edge of it. But in terms of colour then, this beer, I think it's fair to say this one's a very kind of bright, rich yellow colour. So remember, in terms of the colour of your beer, this depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This determines the magnitude of the colour usually. 2, the length of your wort ball is also going to play a role. And when it comes to sour beers, we also have to think about any barrel aging and any adjuncts that have been put into the beer. So I guess the richer orange colour out of this one may well be coming from the orange zest that's been added into this. But yeah, lovely kind of rich, dark yellow, kind of very light, very, very light amber colour this one. I'm not sure how well that's appearing to you guys in the thing, but to me it's a very, very rich, quite dark yellow actually. But yeah, I think the colour of this one It's pretty much what we would expect when we consider the beer's sea buckthorn and orange zest, to be honest with you. You can see there's a nice little bit of a haziness to it. When it's got wheat and rye and stuff in it, you would kind of expect that as well. But yeah, overall, I don't think there's too much else we can say about the appearance of this one. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but I mean overall it looks pretty nice actually. So I think we can take a closer look at the aroma of this one and just see how we go. Oh, that smells really nice actually. Now what I'm going to say is straight away, this strikes me as one of the kind of spicier this strikes me as one of the spicier beers that I've had from Brekeriet over the years, but I certainly do like it. That's really interesting. Yeah, I think that's the rye though that's doing that. The rye's giving it just a little bit of a kind of grainy, spicy character, but the sea buckthorn I always remember could give you a little bit of a sort of spicy character as well. I've never tried sea buckthorn on its own actually, and that is something that I should do. I should seek that out and get a proper idea of what the flavour is all about actually. But yeah, it does also say on the side here, it says there's gurkmeja in this, so gurka, yeah, some sort of pickle I guess. Not the greatest fan of pickle actually, so that is one thing, and that's what it reminds me of. It's got that earthy sort of pickly type note to it for sure, a little bit as well. But yeah, I think the rye in this one might be giving it a bit of a grainy spice. So yeah, the aroma out of this one I think is very, very nice. But on the how do you say, on the backbone of this beer, it's definitely got a wee bit of a sort of bread crusty sort of thing in there, so you have a little bit of a kind of rye, brown bread crusty element. You can smell a wee bit of the wheat there, giving you a bit of a white bready character. Then mixed in with all of that, there's a wee bit of a kind of spicy character as well. As I say, I think that comes from the sea buckthorn, but it also comes from the it also comes from the I think it's also coming from whatever the gurkmeja that's been added into this one is. I'm not 100% sure what that is. But yeah, certainly get a wee bit of a kind of spicy note out of this one, which I think is interesting. But yeah, smooth white bready notes, a little bit of a bread crusty element in there, a wee bit of a kind of gurkey spice, and I think there's a wee bit of a kind of rye grainy quality in there as well. So yeah, I like how that goes together for sure. So yeah, fruity part of the beer is kind of mixing in with that as well, which is really interesting. So yeah, let's focus on the other parts of things. I'm just trying to see, does this one have hops in it? No, it doesn't. So this is a hopless. This is a hopless sour, this one. You'll get some of the beers do have a little bit of hops. And from Brekeriet, I think the majority of them have hops in it, but this one apparently is hopless. Although the strange thing is, I do still get a little bit of a kind of green component to this one. I mean, I still get a wee touch of earthiness, you get a little bit of a floral note to it, and a wee bit of a kind of wet, grassy kind of thing. But the malt base, I think we've covered quite well. There's one or two little woody notes under this, and as I say, a wee bit of a kind of dry, woody, spicy kind of thing. So yeah, quite a few things going on in the kind of malty, adjuncty backbone of this beer. So yeah, the way this goes together is very, very nice. But yeah, let's look at the fruity side of things then, just to round off our take on the aroma here. See, you can certainly get a nice juicy orange zest out of this one. I mean, the way that the orange comes out, I have to say, I very, very much like. So big kind of juicy notes in there, a wee bit of that kind of zesty, a wee bit of that kind of zesty dryness, I guess, on the front of the nose in this beer, and then you've got a bit of the sea buckthorn kind of just sitting underneath as well. So I really like how that goes together in the beer too, and I do think the sea buckthorn is giving you a wee bit of that kind of herbally kind of spicy note to it as well. So I'm quite curious to see what this one is going to do for us on the fruity side of things. But very quirky smelling beer, I have to say. I don't think I've ever tried a mimosa, come to think of it, but that's something that I will need to do in the future. I actually should have done that in preparation for this video, in fact, but what can you do? Busy. So yeah, let's go for it then. So this beer, we're going to have a taste of this one now. This one is the Mimosa, a 6.5% sour ale from Brekeriet in Landskrona. This one is brewed with wheat malt, rye malt, barley malt, some kind of Gurkha type thing, sea buckthorn, a bit of orange, and a little bit of vanilla as well, actually. Yeah, kind of interesting. I'm sure you don't get too much of the vanilla out of this one, I don't think. It kind of mixes in with the spice a lot. But let's have a taste of this one then. 6.5%er. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. That is quite interesting. It's got quite a full, I'm going to say straight away, it's got quite a full flavour to it. I would certainly say that. And I mean, when I think about the other sour beers I've had this month, you know, the Elm 11, the American Pie from Brewski, this one is a completely different kettle of fish to those beers, absolutely. But yeah, the way that this goes about its business is actually quite nice. I was a bit sceptical about it with that kind of pickle sort of thing, because pickle is a flavour that I've never ever taken to. I've just never liked it. But I think this beer goes about its business in a very nice and just steady way. So I can get on board with this one. It takes a wee bit of a while to get used to these kind of beers from Brekeriet, and they've got a good few beers that are based on cocktails like this. So basically sour beers based on cocktails. But this one I think is quite nicely done, absolutely. So, where do we start with this one then? The backbone of the beer. I find the backbone of this beer to be quite smooth and woody, and that goes across the middle third and the back third of your palate. On top of that, you do get a very smooth kind of, how do we say, you get a smooth sort of brown bready kind of character there, so you can feel a wee bit of that kind of bread crusty, wholemeal brown bready sort of thing there. On top of that, you get a bit of the smoother kind of wheaty character, which I very much like. You can feel, if we focus on the middle third of your palate, towards the front, on the front half of that middle third of your palate, on the front half of that middle third of your palate, you'll get a wee bit of the kind of vanilla actually, which is kind of interesting. But I would say that on top of that middle third of your palate, on top of the flavours I've just described to you, you get more of a, kind of Werther's original kind of brown sugary sort of thing actually. So yeah, the way that this goes together, I think, is it's really it's nice. I mean, I like the way that the malty characters and the adjuncty characters kind of build up on each other in this one. So yeah, woody backbone, bit of brown bready bread crust in there, a wee bit of the kind of rye bread, of course, there, smooth wheaty note, bit of vanilla on the front half of that middle third of your palate. Then on top of that, you get a bit more of that kind of Werther's original butter candy, brown sugary sort of thing coming out of the beer. And yeah, I think that sums up the kind of middle third of your palate quite nicely. So let's focus on the back third of your palate then. So border region between middle third and back third of your palate, a little bit of a bready build up once again, a wee bit more of a bread crusty note. And as you go into the back third of your palate, you can feel that the woody base is there, the little bit of the little brown bready sort of thing is a little bit, you know, kind of more airy and almost thicker. And on top of that, the wheaty layer is a bit more kind of dense and thicker as well. But yeah, you do get a nice big kind of yeasty character coming off of this beer on the so on top of that, and that's where you get a little bit. I think that's where you get a wee bit of the kind of pickly spice and a wee bit more of the kind of rye graininess. So I do like how that goes together in this one for sure. But yeah, fruity side of this beer does as I say, sorry, the kind of the malty and the yeasty side of this beer with all the adjuncts and stuff that goes in there works out very, very nicely in this one. So it gets a thumbs up from me. It's a very quirky beer, this. I've not had anything like this, but you know, I've said this about quite a few Brekeriet beers in the past, so this, to be honest, shouldn't really be new to you, I think. But yeah, I certainly do like this, so thumbs up to Brekeriet once again. Now, as we said earlier, this beer doesn't have hops in it, but I certainly think you still get a wee bit of the hop placebo out of this one. So in the back corners of the palate, there's a wee bit of a earthiness in there. So yeah, there is a wee bit of a kind of earthiness in there, but as you move further forward, it does get a little bit of a kind of herbal quality to it, and as you push further forward towards the front corners of the palate, it stays kind of quite smooth because there's no hops in there, but I still think you get a little touch of an almost floral placebo, and round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit lighter and grassy, and then a wee bit more kind of zesty, and a bit more zesty and things. So yeah, I really like how this one goes about its business in that regard. It's just weird that there's no hops in it, but you still get these little placebo effects. So yeah, that's interesting for sure. Yes. Yeah. So let's focus on the kind of fruity side of the beer then, and this is where we're going to really talk about the adjuncts. So front third of your palate then. Border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Again, you get a little bit of a bready build up in this one. A wee bit of bread crust, and I think a wee bit of the pickle there in that border region too. But the base of the front third of your palate, again, it's quite woody. You can feel a wee bit of the vanilla in there. A little bit of brown bread, a little bit of white bread, and on top of that, you've got the kind of fruity adjuncts in there. The sea buckthorn, I think, is adding a wee bit of a kind of herbally, spicy character to it, and I think a little bit of the tartness as well. Like I say, I'm not overly familiar with the actual flavour of sea buckthorn, so that's something that I do need to, you know, seek out and have a proper taste of and just see how it goes. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer for me, I think, is really quite nice. Definitely, I like how this beer goes about its business in that perspective. So yeah, the fruity part, as I say, it really, to me, it leans really towards the oranges, but it's kind of grounded a little bit more by the sort of more, what I suspect is a more kind of herbally quality from the sea buckthorn. So this is interesting, but yeah, big zesty character on the kind of front third of your palate, absolutely. And the thing you also have to remember is that when you add fruits into beers as adjuncts, they're always going to suppress a little bit of the green component of the beer. So even if this beer did have hops in it, a lot of the bitterness you get would be suppressed by these two fruit adjuncts that have been put in here. But yeah, I like how this one goes about its business, that's for sure. So yeah, you get a bit of zip, you do get a little bit of zip to this one when you take it in with the big orangey zestiness, and that lingers there the further you go into the aftertaste, and I think the sea buckthorn just sits in behind that and gives you this more kind of herbally sort of kind of thing, and that comes out a little bit more the further you go into the aftertaste. I think that's the kind of pickle type quality that's coming out of the beer as well, which is interesting. But the woodiness and the vanilla qualities in there as well, they start to show their head a little bit more the further you go into the aftertaste too. So this beer is certainly giving me a lot of food for thought, and I'd be potentially willing to go as far as saying this is one of the more complex ones I think that I've had from Brekeriet in quite a little while. So thumbs up to them for that. I do like this one, and I can see why people were telling me to try this, because it is one that really tests the palate, and this is what you want after 3,000 odd reviews. So yeah, thank you for the recommendations for this beer. Yeah, interesting stuff for sure. And as I say, I wish I knew exactly what a mimosa was. I do need to get a little bit more acquainted with cocktails, of course, but outside the videos I really don't drink very much. Pretty much everything I drink alcohol wise you guys see here on the channel. But yeah, I think to be honest, I think that sums up everything we really need to say about the flavour of the beer. So we can round off with the mouthfeel then. It's quite bottom end and mid bodied. Carbonation is quite smooth. You've got that sort of crispness and wetness, I think, that you would expect of that kind of crispness and wetness that you might expect of a sour beer, of a Brekeriet beer. But there's nothing wrong with that at all. I really like how it goes about its business in that sense, as I've said. But yeah, I think we can safely say that it's everything you'd expect of a Brekeriet sour. In terms of hoppy bitterness and things, it's got no hops in it, so I think technically speaking it's got no IBUs to it, but probably it's got somewhere in the region of like 10 or something like this. You do get a wee bit of spiciness there from the kind of pickly notes, as we say, that would give you a kind of equivalent, if you like. I always find that sometimes spiciness and bitterness can go hand in hand in a number of ways, but technically speaking with IBUs, I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, the malt base in this one, as we say, it's got a woody undertone to it, a lovely smoothness to it, a bit of graininess of course, and a wee bit of sweetness, I think, the further you go into the aftertaste from the vanilla and the very slight kind of butter candy type notes that you get out of it. Lovely kind of juicy zestiness to it, of course, and you get a little bit more of a kind of juicy fruity character as well. So I really like how this beer goes about its business in that sense. So yeah, this is an interesting one, definitely one of the more quirky ones I've had from Brekeriet over the last while, and that's what I love about this brewery, is that they are capable of producing, you know, really kind of random things like this. So you're just like, you know, when you first try it, you're like, not sure about this, but then it really grows on you. I've had that with quite a few Brekeriet beers in the past, but this is certainly one of the more zippy ones I think I've had in recent times, and it's also got a lovely kind of depth of flavour to it, potentially one of the more complex ones that I've had from them as well. But yeah, thumbs up to them for this. I think that's a good place to round off this review. So yeah, this one is the Mimosa, 6.5%, a sour with wheat, rye, barley malt, some kind of gurkha thing in it, a bit of vanilla, and also some sea buckthorn and tangerines. A very nicely done beer from Brekeriet once again. But thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brekeriet, and we will certainly return to these guys at some point in the very near future. But thanks again for watching. Check out my social media, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Slange it, skål, cheers, and catch you very soon.